Sometimes the most devastating revenge comes not from anger, but from patience. When my daughter-in-law posted those 5 words that would seal her fate, she had no idea she was about to lose everything she'd schemed so hard to steal. The family that truly counts. Those words appeared on my phone screen next to a photo of my daughter-in-law Sandra beaming beside my son David and her mother Patricia. I, the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise him, who had worked my fingers to the bone for 3 decades, had been completely erased from their perfect family portrait. My hands trembled as I typed my response, 2 simple words that would trigger the destruction of Sandra's carefully constructed world. Best wishes. Within an hour, David's panicked voice was echoing through my home. Ma, what have you done? The attorney's calling about the house, the investments, everything's been frozen. His face was ghostly pale, his phone buzzing with calls from the bank. At that moment, I knew my carefully planned retribution had begun. But to truly understand how I reached this breaking point, you need to know the whole story. My name is Margaret Stone, and at 64, I've built an empire through sheer determination and backbreaking work. It started when I was barely 17, pregnant and abandoned, selling homemade pastries from a folding table outside the subway station in Brooklyn. Every dollar I earned went back into ingredients, into hope, into building something bigger. Decade after decade, I clawed my way up from nothing, accumulating for rental properties and a bank account that would make most people envious. Everything changed the spring afternoon David brought Sandra home. I remember the sound of her designer heels clicking against my hardwood floors like a warning bell. She swept into my dining room wearing a form-fitting black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her smile as artificial as the pearls around her neck. "Ah, so you're David's mother," she said, extending a manicured hand that felt cold as marble. "Not pleased to meet you, or I've heard so much about you." Just labeling me as David's mother, as if I were a piece of furniture that came with the apartment. Her perfectly sculpted nails contrasted sharply with my work-worn hands, hands that told the story of every sacrifice I'd made to give my son a better life. David, completely besotted, didn't notice the ice in her voice or the way her eyes assessed my modest home like she was calculating its resale value. My son, my pride and joy, the boy I'd raised alone after his father walked out when he was 9, was utterly blind to the calculating coldness of the woman he'd fallen for. But I stayed quiet and observed, never imagining I was welcoming a predator into my home. That first dinner became a minefield of passive aggression. "What an eclectic decorating approach," Sandra commented, her gaze lingering mockingly on my collection of family photographs. She paused longest at the picture of me receiving my real estate license, the only professional education I could afford while raising David single-handedly. "This casserole has such a robust flavor," she added, barely touching her plate as if my cooking might contaminate her. Each comment was a calculated insult wrapped in false politeness, but I swallowed my pride and kept smiling, hoping time would soften her attitude. When I served dessert, I overheard her whisper to David, "Darling, does she always cook such simple food? Mother Patricia has a personal chef who creates much more sophisticated cuisine." Her words cut through me like broken glass. This woman wasn't just criticizing my cooking, she was establishing a hierarchy where her wealthy family looked down on everything I'd worked to provide. Patricia, her mother, owned a chain of exclusive boutiques and lived in a palatial home in the most expensive neighborhood in the city. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the barely touched plates Sandra had pushed aside. The silence felt heavy with foreboding. David was too intoxicated by his girlfriend's superficial charm to notice how she treated me. For the first time in years, tears rolled down my weathered cheeks as I sat in the armchair where I'd mended his school clothes to save money for his education. But I was a survivor. I'd overcome poverty, abandonment, and countless hardships. I wasn't about to let some entitled princess make me feel worthless in my own home. I had no idea that first humiliation was just the opening act of a 4-year nightmare that would push me to the most drastic decision of my life. The months that followed became a masterclass in psychological warfare disguised as family visits. Sandra perfected the art of destroying my self-esteem with surgical precision. Every Sunday dinner became an ordeal where I served as her target practice for venomous remarks delivered with a sweet smile. "Oh, darling mother-in-law, still using that drugstore moisturizer? Just look at those lines." She'd coo while applying her imported skincare products in my bathroom mirror. Her words were poison wrapped in silk, delivered in that honeyed voice she used to manipulate my son. I clenched my teeth and continued serving meals, choking down my humiliation like bitter medicine. Things escalated when they announced their engagement. David arrived one evening, eyes shining with happiness, clutching a bottle of expensive champagne and babbling about wedding preparations. "Ma, I want you to be the first to know Sandra and I are getting married this fall," he said, embracing me with the strength that reminded me of the child he once was. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, but I smiled and congratulated him because that's what mothers do. We bury our pain to see our children happy. Sandra naturally had different plans for my role in their lives. In the weeks that followed, she began visiting alone, supposedly to collaborate on wedding planning and bond. But the reality was far more sinister. She'd position herself in my living room like she owned it, legs crossed elegantly, that practiced smile plastered across her face while she laid down the new family hierarchy. "Listen, dear mother-in-law, I realize you've had David all to yourself for all these years, but circumstances are about to change," she announced one Thursday afternoon, sipping tea from my finest china. Her nails drummed against the table in a hypnotic, menacing rhythm. "A wife requires her space, her privacy. There simply cannot be interference from a third party in the marriage." The way she said third party made my blood freeze. I explained that I'd never interfered in David's relationships, that I'd always respected his independence and choices. But Sandra had it all figured out. "Oh, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting you're deliberately causing problems. It's just that, well, men can become overly dependent on their mothers, can't they? And that creates complications in a marriage." Her words were like acid, precise and corrosive. During the wedding preparations, Sandra ensured I felt like an outsider during every significant moment. When we went shopping for her gown, she relegated me to a corner chair while she and Patricia made all the decisions. "This is a mother-daughter tradition," Patricia declared with a condescending smile. "I'm certain you understand." I sat there silently, watching my daughter-in-law's mother claim the role that should have been mine. The ultimate humiliation came when they scheduled venue tours. David had invited me, but when we arrived, Sandra feigned surprise. "Oh, honey, I had no idea you'd asked your mother to join us. We'd agreed it would just be the three of us," she said, gesturing to herself and Patricia. "But she can tag along, though she won't have input since we've already finalized everything." I became a silent observer at my own son's wedding planning. On their wedding day, Sandra orchestrated my exclusion from photographs with military precision. Every time the photographer approached our family group, she'd manufacture an excuse to dismiss me. "Dear mother-in-law, could you ensure the caterers have enough champagne? Details matter so much." I obeyed like hired help while Patricia took my place in all the important family portraits. After their honeymoon, the couple moved into an apartment I'd helped finance. David had come to me in tears, explaining that his engineering salary wasn't sufficient for the down payment. "Ma, you know I'll repay every penny. I just need a loan of $45,000. How could I refuse to help my only son begin his married life?" But visits to their new home became weekly torture sessions. Sandra had decorated the space in a sterile modern style that clashed with everything I valued. "Careful with that sofa, dear mother-in-law. It's imported Italian leather and quite delicate. We wouldn't want it damaged or stained," she'd warn every time I visited, treating me like a clumsy intruder in the home I'd helped purchase. During family dinners, Sandra mastered the technique of making me invisible. She'd discuss only subjects I knew nothing about: exclusive restaurants they frequented, avant-garde films they watched, luxury vacations they planned. When I attempted to join the conversation, she'd look at me with pity. "Oh yes, dear mother-in-law, but you wouldn't be familiar with that establishment. It's rather exclusive." Her words were subtle slaps that David never noticed. The final breaking point came when Sandra began influencing David's financial decisions. One day, He appeared at my house with a proposal that chilled me to my core. "Ma, Sandra and I have been discussing the future. You're getting older, and we need financial security down the road. What if you transfer the properties into my name? That way, if something happens to you, there won't be any legal complications." It was David's voice, but Sandra's manipulation. That night, alone in my house, I realized I'd raised a stranger. The boy who once cried when I scraped my knee was now asking me to surrender everything I'd built through decades of sacrifice. But a mother's love makes us blind and deaf to logic. Against every instinct, I signed the documents he placed before me, trusting that he would never betray me. That day, I sealed my own fate, though it would take months to understand the depth of my mistake. The breaking point came during what would be my final family dinner in what was legally no longer my home. Sandra was describing their future plans with Patricia, discussing how they'd renovate once they had more space. Their voices carried from the kitchen where I was washing dishes, always my role now in my former home. "Mother Patricia, once we clear out some of the clutter, this place will be spectacular," Sandra was saying. "We can knock down that wall where the old woman keeps her sewing machine and create the walk-in closet I've always wanted. And her bathroom would make a perfect home office for David." Patricia's response was even more devastating. "Wonderful, darling. I've already spoken with the architect. Once we relocate the elderly lady to that charming retirement community we discussed, this house will reach its full potential without all that outdated furniture cluttering it up." I stood frozen at the sink, my hands trembling in the soapy water, as they casually planned to erase every trace of my existence from the home I'd built. But instead of despair, I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. If they could plot my destruction with such callous precision, I could plan my defense with equal determination. That night, I made a phone call that would change everything. I called Marcus, my attorney, whispering from the bathroom of what was legally no longer my own house. "Marcus, we need to accelerate our timeline. This situation has become unbearable." My lawyer had been quietly reviewing the documents I'd signed, searching for legal vulnerabilities to challenge the property transfers. "Margaret, I have exceptional news," Marcus replied, his voice filled with optimism. "We've discovered several critical irregularities in those contracts. First, there was no mandatory cooling-off period for transfers of this magnitude. Second, the restrictive clauses weren't properly explained to you. Third, we have evidence you signed under emotional duress from family coercion." My heart raced. For the first time in months, I saw light at the end of the tunnel. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Continue documenting everything happening in your house," Marcus instructed. "Every insult, every humiliation, every indication they're forcing you to live in degrading conditions in your own former property. If possible, record conversations legally, of course." Over the following days, I transformed into a professional investigator. I purchased a small recording device I could conceal in my apron and began capturing Sandra's most incriminating conversations. The first recording was devastating. Sandra was on the phone with Patricia, strategizing how they'd remodel their house once they eliminated me. "Mother, I have it all planned out," Sandra said coldly. "Once I'm pregnant, we'll tell the old lady that the baby requires tranquility and her presence is too stressful. If she resists, we'll remind her she has no legal claim to this house. And if she persists, we'll pursue a restraining order for family harassment." Patricia's response was even more chilling. "Perfect, sweetheart. I've already consulted with the contractor. We can remove her bedroom wall to create that walk-in closet you've dreamed of, and convert her bathroom into David's home office. This house will be magnificent without all her antiquated belongings." That recording became my most precious evidence, undeniable proof that Sandra had orchestrated my downfall from the beginning. But I needed more evidence of the systematic manipulation she wielded over both David and me. For weeks, I gathered material like an investigative reporter. One afternoon, while Sandra was showering, I examined her phone, carelessly left on the kitchen counter. What I discovered stole my breath. She had a text conversation with a friend outlining her strategy for dealing with the clingy mother-in-law. The messages were chilling in their calculated cruelty. "Girl, I swear this old bat drives me insane, but I'm almost finished with this operation," Sandra had written. "David's completely under my control now. I've convinced him his mother is toxic and controlling. Next phase is pregnancy. Once I'm expecting, I'll claim I need peace and quiet and she has to go for the baby's welfare. It's the perfect strategy." My hands shook with rage and adrenaline as I photographed the texts with my own phone. Each message was a confession, proof that everything had been premeditated. Sandra wasn't just selfish, she was a master manipulator who had studied every move to destroy my relationship with my son and steal my legacy. The most devastating evidence came by accident. One Sunday afternoon, David had stepped out to purchase something for dinner, and Sandra assumed I was napping in my room. She took a call in the living room, unaware I was listening from the kitchen with my recorder activated. "Yes, grandmother, everything's almost finalized," Sandra said in her syrupy voice. "David's completely malleable. He does whatever I suggest. I secured the house in his name, but he doesn't realize that when we divorce, I'll receive half of everything. Old Margaret worked her entire life to build this estate, and now it's going to be mine." Her next words froze my blood. "No, grandmother, I never intended to stay with David permanently. He's spineless and unambitious, but he was perfect for acquiring what I wanted. Once everything's legally secured, I'll divorce him, take my half, and marry someone more suitable." That confession was the moment I decided it was time for total warfare. Sandra hadn't just humiliated me and stolen my home, she was planning to destroy my son after using him to take everything I'd built. The war had officially begun, and she had no idea I'd been preparing for this battle for months. That night, while everyone slept, I sat in what had once been my favorite armchair and planned every detail of my counterattack. I had recordings, photographs, bank documents, and witnesses. I had a brilliant attorney who'd found the legal irregularities we needed. Most importantly, I had the iron will of a woman who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. My revenge would unfold in 3 perfectly orchestrated phases, triggered by the social media posts Sandra would make. But before we reach that pivotal moment, let me tell you about the final months of preparation when I became a silent strategist, amassing legal weapons for the ultimate battle. Through the fall and winter months, Sandra intensified her psychological attacks. She no longer bothered concealing her contempt, especially when David wasn't present. One Tuesday morning, as I cleaned the breakfast dishes she deliberately left dirty, she sauntered into the kitchen with that venomous smile I'd grown to despise. "Dear mother-in-law, I have a proposition you'll adore," she said, leaning against the counter like she owned the place. "Mother Patricia knows of this lovely senior community with gardens and activities for people your age. Don't you think you'd be happier there, surrounded by folks who share your limitations?" The way she said "your limitations" felt like a death sentence. I responded with the composure I'd learned to maintain through months of torment. "Sandra, this is my home. It contains my memories, my history, my entire life. I'm not going anywhere." But she was prepared, as always, with a comeback. "Oh, dear mother-in-law, you don't comprehend the situation. This isn't your house anymore. Legally, it belongs to David, and David is my husband. I'm the lady of the house now." Her words were a slap, but they also fueled my resolve to accelerate my plan. That afternoon, I met Marcus at his office to review everything we'd collected. My attorney had been working tirelessly for months and finally had game-changing news. "Margaret, we've found the smoking gun," he said with a triumphant smile. "The documents you signed contain irregularities so severe any judge would declare them null and void. Additionally, your recordings clearly demonstrate you were a victim of family manipulation and psychological abuse." My heart raced as I reviewed the dossier he'd prepared. "But that's not all," Marcus continued. "We've also discovered Sandra's been using the properties as collateral for personal loans without your knowledge. She's accumulated debts exceeding $75,000 tied to properties that legally still belong to you." My hands trembled as I grasped the scope of the fraud. The plan was elegant but devastating. We'd file a lawsuit for contract nullification, breach of trust, psychological manipulation, and fraudulent use of assets. But timing was everything. We need a public catalyst, Marcus explained. Something that undeniably demonstrates Sandra's cruelty and contempt toward you. Evidence so clear, no one could defend her behavior. That catalyst came on Friday, January 15th, a date forever etched in my memory. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when I heard Sandra's laughter from the living room. She was with Patricia and 2 friends, all giggling over her phone. "What a beautiful photograph," one friend exclaimed. "You look like the perfect family." Curiosity drew me closer, and what I saw broke my heart into 1,000 pieces while simultaneously igniting the fury I'd been suppressing for months. Sandra had posted a photo of herself, David, and Patricia, all smiling happily in what had once been my living room, with a caption that would change everything. "The family that truly counts." The message was clear and cruel. I, who had raised David alone for 26 years, who had sacrificed my youth and dreams to give him a decent life, had been officially erased from Sandra's version of family. The photo was deliberately composed to exclude me, and the caption was a public declaration that I was irrelevant. Friends from the neighborhood called immediately. "Margaret, did you see what your daughter-in-law posted?" asked Helen, my longtime neighbor. "How could she be so heartless?" Others saw the post too, and supportive comments for me began pouring in. But I knew this was the moment I'd been waiting for. With trembling hands, I typed my response on my phone. Just 2 words that would change everything forever. "Best wishes." The instant I pressed send, I knew I'd detonated a nuclear bomb that would obliterate the perfect life Sandra thought she'd constructed on my ruins. Immediately after, I called Marcus. "It's time to execute the plan." The trigger just happened exactly what we needed. My attorney had been anticipating this call for weeks. "Perfect, Margaret. Within the hour, all the legal documents will be in motion. The property transfers will be voided, the bank accounts frozen, and we'll begin immediate recovery of all your assets." As Marcus set the legal machinery in motion, I braced myself for what was coming. I knew within hours David would receive calls that would turn his world upside down. The bank, the attorney, the financial authorities would all inform him simultaneously that he no longer owned anything, that everything had reverted to its original state. During that hour of waiting, Sandra continued laughing with her friends, oblivious to the collapse of her world. "Look how I put all the busybodies in their place," she said, reading comments on her post. "It's about time everyone understood who controls this family." Her words pierced my heart, but they also fed my hunger for justice. At precisely 3 o'clock, David's phone began ringing. First the bank, informing him the accounts linked to the properties had been frozen by court order. 10 minutes later, another call from the attorney who had handled the original transfer, explaining serious legal irregularities in the signed documents. From the kitchen, I could hear David's voice cracking with each call. "What do you mean the accounts are frozen? What does void contracts mean? What irregularities?" Sandra stopped laughing, her face becoming a mask of growing terror. The third call sealed her fate. It was Marcus officially notifying David that a lawsuit had been filed to nullify the property transfers entirely, and until the case was resolved, all assets automatically reverted to their original owner. "Mr. David, your mother has the legal right to immediately reclaim everything that belongs to her," Marcus stated firmly. When David hung up, his face was ghostly pale, his hands shaking as he looked to Sandra for answers she couldn't provide. "What's happening?" he shouted at his wife. "Why is the attorney saying Ma can take everything back? What did we do wrong?" Sandra was in shock, unable to process that her perfect scheme had crumbled in minutes. That's when David stormed through the house, calling my name desperately. "Ma, what have you done? The attorney just called about the house, the properties, everything." His voice was a mixture of panic, confusion, and fear. At that moment, I knew my revenge had officially begun, and nothing in that house, now mine again, would ever be the same. "Ma, please tell me what's happening," David pleaded, tears in his eyes, kneeling beside my armchair like he did as a child when he'd broken something valuable. But this time, what was broken was far more than a toy or dish. It was trust, respect, and the family I'd built with so much love and allowed them to destroy. I looked at him with the calm that only years of suffering and the certainty of doing right can bring. Son, sit down. It's time you learned the whole truth, I said, pointing to the sofa where we'd watched movies and talked when he was little. Sandra tried to approach, but I stopped her with a look that brooked no argument. You sit too, Sandra. This concerns you especially. I pulled a thick folder from my bag, one I'd been compiling for months. It contained photographs, transcribed recordings, bank documents, and a detailed timeline of every humiliation I'd endured over the past 2 years. David, I want you to see this, I said, handing him the first photograph. It was a screenshot of a text message where Sandra told a friend she'd use a pregnancy as an excuse to evict me from the house. David's face crumpled as he read it. His eyes scanned the text, and with each line, his expression grew more horrified. Sandra, what is this? He asked his wife, his voice trembling. But she sat silent, her face paler than the living room walls. That's nothing compared to this, I said, handing him the transcript of the recording where Sandra confessed she planned to divorce him once she secured half of everything. Read it aloud, David. I want you to hear the words of the woman you claim to love in your own voice. My son began reading, his voice breaking. David's completely malleable. He does whatever I suggest. I never intended to stay with him permanently. Once everything's legally secured, I'll divorce him, take my half, and marry someone more suitable. Each word was a hammer blow, shattering the image he had of his wife. Sandra tried to defend herself with the same emotional manipulation she'd used for years. Darling, that's not true. I never said those things. Your mother's fabricating everything to tear us apart. Can't you see she's jealous of our love? But her words sounded hollow and desperate, like the last gasps of a cornered animal. I pulled out my phone and played the original recording. Sandra's voice filled the room with crystal clarity. David's completely malleable. He does whatever I suggest. The silence that followed was deafening. David stared at his wife like she was a stranger, as if he just realized he'd been living with someone he didn't know at all. There's more, I continued relentlessly. I showed him the bank documents revealing how Sandra had used my properties as collateral for personal loans. Your wife's been accumulating debts to fund her extravagant lifestyle. She owes $75,000, planning to pay it off by selling my house. The numbers were cold, hard facts, undeniable as steel. David stood and walked to the window, turning his back on Sandra. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. How could I be so blind? He murmured against the glass. How could I let her treat you like this, Ma? How could I be so stupid? His pain was genuine, but it came too late. I wasn't finished. The final blow would be the most devastating. I pulled out the latest recording where Sandra was on the phone with Patricia, planning to turn my bedroom into a walk-in closet once they evicted me. Listen to this, son. Hear how they plan to erase every trace of me from this house. When the recording ended, Sandra finally spoke, but not with her usual manipulative tone. Now she screamed like a wounded animal. Fine. Yes, it's all true. But you brought this on yourself, you meddling old woman, always in the way, always interfering where you don't belong. David needed a wife, not a controlling second mother. Her words confirmed everything I already knew, but hearing them spoken aloud without masks or pretense was liberating. Thank you for your honesty, Sandra, I replied with a calm that infuriated her even more. Now David can see who you really are. She exploded. I don't care what you think. I deserve better than this outdated house and this mediocre family. David's a spineless loser. And you're a bitter old hag who doesn't know when to quit. Her mask had fallen completely, revealing the venomous snake she'd always been. David turned slowly toward his wife, and for the first time in years, I saw in his eyes the determination he'd inherited from me. Sandra, I want you out of this house right now. I never want to see you again. His voice was firm, free of the weakness he'd shown for so long. You're throwing me out? Sandra screamed, incredulous. This is my house. I'm your wife. You can't do this. But David had made his final decision. This was never your house. This is my mother's house, the woman who sacrificed everything for me. while you only plotted to destroy me. Get out now before I call the police." Just then the doorbell rang. It was Marcus, my attorney, with a police officer. "Miss Stone, we're here to formalize the recovery of your properties and officially notify the nullification of the contracts," Marcus announced professionally. The officer held the legal documents that would turn Sandra's world into a nightmare. "Miss Caldwell," the officer said, "you have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings and vacate the property. Any attempt to remain beyond that will constitute trespassing." The words hit Sandra like a social death sentence. She glared at everyone with pure hatred. "This isn't over," she threatened as she stormed upstairs to pack. "You don't know who you're dealing with. My family has connections, attorneys, influence. I'll reclaim everything that's mine." Her words sounded like the desperate roar of a defeated beast. From upstairs came the sounds of drawers being yanked open, clothes thrown into suitcases, objects crashing against walls. Sandra was destroying what she couldn't take in a final act of childish revenge. But I didn't care anymore. Objects can be replaced. Dignity and respect, once lost, are far harder to reclaim. When Sandra came downstairs dragging her suitcases, the elegant, manipulative woman who'd entered my home 4 years ago was gone. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared from angry tears, and her designer dress was wrinkled from her frantic packing. She looked like an actress stumbling off stage after the most challenging performance of her life. "David, please reconsider." She tried one last time, her syrupy voice perfected over years of manipulation. "This is all your mother's doing. She's tearing us apart because she can't stand you being happy with another woman. Don't you see she's manipulating your mind?" Her desperate words bounced off David's newfound resolve like raindrops on a closed window. "Sandra, it doesn't work anymore," David replied firmly. "You can't manipulate me with your lies. I've seen the proof, heard the recordings, and I know exactly who you are and what you plan to do to me." The officer checked his watch with professional impatience. "Ma'am, you have 10 minutes remaining to leave the property." Sandra looked around the living room she'd redecorated to her tastes, as if memorizing every detail for an uncertain future. "Fine," she said at last, her voice cracking but still laced with venom. "I'm leaving, but this isn't over. I'll sue you for defamation, psychological abuse, conspiracy." Marcus smiled with the confidence of someone holding all the winning cards. "Miss Caldwell, I suggest you consult your attorneys before making legal threats. We have sufficient evidence to pursue criminal charges for fraud, financial manipulation, and psychological abuse. Any attempt at legal revenge will only worsen your situation." The smirk vanished from Sandra's face as she realized she had no legal ground to stand on. Patricia arrived in her luxury SUV, honking impatiently from the street. When she stormed into the house and saw the scene, her face fell. "What's happening? Why does Sandra have suitcases? Who are these people?" "Mother, the old lady set a legal trap," Sandra explained through theatrical sobs that fooled no one anymore. "She's reclaimed all the properties and they're evicting me." Patricia turned to me with the arrogance her daughter had inherited. "Miss Stone, this is outrageous. My daughter is a married woman with legal rights to this property. You can't simply throw her out." Marcus stepped in with surgical precision. "Miss Hensley, your daughter never had legal rights to these properties. The transfer contracts have been voided due to serious irregularities. Furthermore, we've discovered that she used the properties as collateral for unauthorized personal loans, which constitutes fraud." His words hit Patricia like a legal avalanche. Her arrogance melted into terror as she grasped the legal implications. "Federal crime? What are you talking about? My daughter would never do anything illegal," Patricia protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Miss Hensley," Marcus continued relentlessly, "we have evidence that you actively participated in the psychological manipulation of my client. The recordings include conversations where you suggest specific methods to pressure Ms. Stone into abandoning her home." Patricia's face turned white as paper. The officer checked his watch again. "Ladies, your time is up. You must leave the property immediately, or I'll have to arrest you for trespassing." His words were the final catalyst. Patricia grabbed her daughter's arm and dragged her toward the door. "This isn't over," Patricia shouted from the doorway. "We know influential people. We have expensive attorneys. We'll reclaim everything that's ours." But her threats rang hollow, like the last roars of a wounded lion unable to hunt. "Miss Hensley," I replied with a calm that enraged them further, "nothing here ever belonged to you. Everything you obtained was through deception and manipulation. Now you're reaping what you sowed." From the window, we watched them climb into Patricia's SUV. Sandra sobbed hysterically while her mother tried to console her, probably already plotting their next move. But I knew they had no legal foundation to fight on. Marcus had built an airtight case that would withstand any counterattack. When the SUV disappeared around the corner, a profound silence filled my house. It was different from the oppressive silence of the months of humiliation. This was a silence of liberation, of justice served, of dignity reclaimed. For the first time in years, my house felt like a home again. David approached me, tears in his eyes. "Ma, I don't know how to apologize for everything I put you through. I was blind, an idiot, a terrible son. I let that woman humiliate you in your own home, treat you like a stranger, and plot to steal everything you built." His pain was genuine, the first step toward healing our relationship. "Son," I said, taking his hands in mine, "a mother's love doesn't disappear with mistakes. You were manipulated by an expert. What matters is that you see the truth now and are willing to make things right." The months following Sandra's eviction felt like living in a new world. My house, once a silent battlefield, transformed into a sanctuary of peace where I could finally breathe without fear of humiliation or attack. The legal battle ended in total victory. Sandra not only lost her lawsuit, but had to pay legal fees and a fine for attempted estate fraud. Marcus had built such a solid case that her expensive attorneys couldn't save her. News of her legal defeat spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People who once admired her supposed sophistication now spoke of her as a cautionary tale of what happens when you try to defraud a hardworking family. David slowly became the man I remembered before Sandra's influence. The divorce finalized without complications since she had no legal grounds to claim anything. He'd lost weight during those difficult months but gained something far more valuable: the ability to recognize manipulation. Sandra tried to start over in another city, but her reputation followed her. In the age of social media, stories of family manipulation and estate fraud travel fast, especially with documented evidence. A year after the drama, I received an unexpected letter from Sandra, handwritten on expensive paper she probably couldn't afford in her new financial situation. The letter was long, filled with apologies that sounded genuine, but also justifications showing she still didn't fully grasp the gravity of her actions. I chose not to respond, not out of cruelty, but because Sandra needed to live with the consequences of her actions without seeking absolution from those she'd hurt. Today, my life has found a happiness I never thought possible after so much pain. My house is a home again, filled with mutual love and respect. David has started dating a new woman, Lisa, an elementary school teacher who treats me with the respect and warmth a mother-in-law deserves. The difference is striking. While Sandra entered my home like an invader conquering enemy territory, Lisa arrives with humility and genuine interest in our family's story. "Miss Margaret, could you teach me how to make that stew David loves?" she asked last Sunday. "I want to learn the recipes that matter to him, the ones connected to his childhood memories." Her words were music to my ears, the sound of a woman who understands that loving a man means respecting those who shaped him. In the end, Sandra did me an unwitting favor. Her cruelty forced me to discover a strength I didn't know I possessed. It taught me to value my own dignity, and showed me it's never too late to stand up to those who try to break us. Most importantly, it gave me back my son in a deeper, more authentic way than we'd ever shared. They thought they could destroy me, but they only helped me build walls that no one will ever breach again. Behind those walls, protected by the wisdom of years and battles won, I now live a life filled with the peace that comes from valuing yourself as much as you value others. Sometimes the sweetest victory isn't the one that comes from revenge, but the one that comes from reclaiming what was always rightfully yours. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more tales of justice prevailing over manipulation.